I just thought, wow, he's literally the coolest action hero there ever was.
You gonna arrest me? I'm out of bullets!
Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of Make Steven Seagal Great Again. In this episode, we're going to talk about the sincerity of Steven Seagal's work, why Aikido was a perfect fit for his martial arts thriller films, and why I think it's a lot more cinematic than the martial arts portrayed in films these days with all the tricking and stuff. Anyway, my guest once again is Port Film Co-op. Make sure to check out his YouTube channel, link in the description below. And make sure to check out episode 1 and 2 of this series if you haven't seen it yet, also linked in the description below. And if you like this kind of content and want to help support the channel, please click that like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video. With all that said, let's get on with making Steven Seagal great again.
Well, one of the problems I think we have now is this modern sense of irony. And if you look at those early Seagal films, they're incredibly sincere films. And so I don't think that the modern mind can necessarily handle that because the modern mind is particularly young people, is so taken over by irony from internet culture. And so it's very lazy to cover someone like Seagal in an ironic way and sort of poking fun. That taking the work seriously and receiving that work as a sincere viewer is something completely different. And it's not lazy. The thing is with sincerity, all those films are sincere, whether it be above the law in terms of speaking truth to power.
You guys think you're above the law, but you ain't above mine.
Or his, environmental epic.
I think we need a responsible body of people that can actually represent us rather than big business. This body of people must not allow the introduction of anything into our environment that is not absolutely biodegradable or able to be chemically neutralized upon production.
That is a sincere work of art. Now, the thing is, you can make an ironic work of art and it's not very good. And then you say, oh, but it's supposed to be not good because I'm being ironic. Like, don't you get it? Well, with sincerity, you can't do that. You're putting yourself out there, a piece of yourself and a piece of your soul. Yeah, it's very different. So we're living in a world, like I said, with the internet, these videos and video essays are just programming people, what to think. And it's programming them to be, ironic robots that don't take anything seriously. And like all of those early Seagal films are very passionate, usually about justice.
How can I keep you from killing my son?
You told Richie to get a lawyer. Have him turn himself in. If not, I'm gonna kill him.
Like you'll notice that all of those early works, I barely remember a sex scene in them. Like they weren't sexually explicit films, and surely that was a choice of Seagal, because what would Hollywood like to do? It would like to put nudity in everything to help it sell, and in fact that's often a selling point of the genre. Like it'll often have something like that come into the story. I think that he knew what he wanted to do.
Whoa! Shut the music off.
And that he wanted to contribute something to the world that would benefit it.
Writing an environmental it's a piece on toxic waste,
Which concerned me greatly because if it gets into the aquifer, it could destroy the drinking water for thousands of miles and kill a bunch of people up and around in here.
Yeah, no, those early films are almost like one large complete film. Like there's such a continuity between them in a moral sense and his persona. I mean, you could argue that his persona just carries on through the rest of the work as well. But those studio pictures, those big budgeted studio pictures, form one really solid piece of work. None of those films are bad. They're all excellent.
Do you have a favorite among those early films?
It's a hard one to choose, but it's probably either his first film, Above the Law, or Out for Justice, because Out for Justice just has everything in just great acting, it's just such a great crime drama. I think they're all good. I would say that his second film, Hard to Kill, is probably the weakest of those, but it's still a good film. It's still I think it's excellent.
And I'll tell you why. Superior attitude, superior state of mind.
It's hard to choose because then you can, like, the easy one to say would be Under Siege, that being the most popular.
Sure.
But it's such a solid group of films. It's hard to pick a favorite. I think that they're really consistent.
Yeah, I mean, Out for Justice is certainly a common one, but I could see how somebody would put Above the Law up there. Then, of course, Under Siege. But I do agree with you about, Hard to Kill, which I like, and like you mentioned, it's good. But I would put that after, those other ones and Marked for Death, etc. But that's only because the other ones are so good. It's not like Hard to Kill is not good. It's just the other ones are just better, in my opinion.
They're almost like a genre of their own. I just think of it as this Seagal genre, and that genre is a martial arts thriller. That's what they are. I don't think there really were American martial art thrillers before that. There were martial art thrillers in Hong Kong, but they were very different. And that reminds us that Seagal brought us something very new to the screen with Aikido, like that particular style. With just a wrist lock and someone, does a 360 in the air, like flipping over. It's so dynamic for the screen.
Yeah, 100% agree. I like it more than the stuff they do these days when you have all these like trickster guys mixing gymnastics and, doing backflips that lead into drop kicks. It's like, I think they just try to push things so far. Like, I'm glad there are guys that can do it without wire work these days, but there's a certain ridiculousness of it that takes me out of, I know it's a movie fight, but it's still a fight. Whereas Aikido, and I know a lot of people, are critical of Aikido, but when you watch it on screen, it's like, I could picture this really working. And there are a few people that could legitimately pull that off, in my opinion, not a lot, Seagal being one of them. But I don't think you're ever going to see somebody in the street doing a backflip leading into a dropkick. Because even if you land that, it's so stupid because you're essentially laying down on the ground. Like, why would you want to put yourself on the ground in a fight? That's the last thing you want to do. I mean, even if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you don't want to go to the ground in the street because you're probably not fighting one guy. And right when you go to the ground, his friend's just going to kick you in the head. But anyway.
If I could just jump in, there's a difference between what works and in the reality of a fight and what is actually entertaining to watch on screen. And I think that I watched a video of Joe Rogan recently where he was talking about Seagal and how powerful those films were and how so many people entered the martial arts, but that those films brought a new realism to the martial arts. Because before that, it was much more like a Hong Kong film, right?
Sure.
But he brought, like I said, they're martial arts thrillers. And they wouldn't work as thrillers if you just started, doing backflips and gymnastics. And look, I love martial arts cinema.
That's a good point. It would just be too ridiculous, and you wouldn't take the plot serious. And a lot of the plots in these Seagal movies, like we were talking about Above the Law, and how Seagal said, "Look, it's not a martial arts movie; it's a true story based on this stuff the CIA was complicit in." But you wouldn't take that serious if, again, like they're doing cartwheel sidekicks and stuff,
Yeah, it's the perfect balance. It's the perfect balance where it's still visually striking, dynamic, and at that point, entirely new. I mean, that's an amazing contribution to cinema. A new kind of martial arts and a new expression on screen. This is the thing. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. He just doesn't. And but I think that it'll change. It'll change, and when people, there's a friend of mine. He's quite a young guy. I told him to watch all the early, Seagal films, and he loves them. He loves them. Like, he thought Seagal was a joke, and he's watching these films. And this guy is a film student, by the way. Like, he thought Seagal was a joke, and he watches these films. And it's like, why didn't I know about these, or why haven't I seen these films? It's because there's YouTube videos telling you that Seagal is a joke and to not watch his films. That's the reason why. But it's the perfect time for a rediscovery.
Now's the time.
And I hope that those films get re-released on Blu-ray with, you know, director's commentaries, but hopefully Seagal commentaries. And
You know, it's the right time for it.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I will say what I like. It seems like they are putting them out because I have seen. I know there's a few, and I know I've seen like Under Siege. I'm pretty sure Netflix has it now for streaming, and some of these other older Seagal films. And it's like, okay, that's good because a lot of people do have a little more time these days to catch up on some films. And I mean, almost everybody's subscribed to Netflix. So, I mean, I like owning physical content, obviously, but I'm glad a lot of people are going to basically be able to easily access these films if they want to. And hopefully it'll just be thrown up on recommendations. If someone's watching, say, a newer action film, they're just scrolling. Maybe someone's curious enough, like, you know, I heard so much about Steven Seagal, like, let's say a younger guy. Let me actually watch Under Siege. Let's see if, you know, he's just this joke. And they're probably going into it wanting to make fun of him, but then they realize this movie's pretty damn good, you know?
You like that?
That's striking an officer! Oh, come on, that's not striking an officer. That's striking an officer.
Yeah. And look, I reckon there's also a case of a lot of people are afraid to admit they like these films too. But the thing is, if you talk to the average
Seagal fans, yeah, sure, I'm sure there's plenty.
If you talk to people from our generation, like they know these films are good. They were around when these films were new. They might have been children, and then they see them on television. They know these films are good. They're still popular. Like that's how, you know, he is still popular, but he's popular with the common man. You know, like the common man likes these films. It's film critics that don't.
I think film critic Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times was really the only one that showed a lot of respect to these films and really seemed to enjoy them and let the audience know that. It was always a breath of fresh air to read his reviews on these films.
This is what we need to do almost one by one. It's the word of mouth on Seagal with people from our generation and older is still very good, and that's why he's still a marketable direct-to-video star.
Sure.
You know, despite being blacklisted from Hollywood, is because there's still this desire. And I read an article about the production of these films and the Bruce Willis films and the films with Eric Roberts and different people like that, is that they can essentially put their face on the cover of a film and it will sell. It doesn't matter how bad it is.
Sure.
Unfortunately. But the upside of that is that's because their prior body of work is so excellent. You know, like even someone like Eric Roberts, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen Star 80. It's a fantastic film. He should have won the Oscar for Best Actor. He's even done a really good martial arts film of his own, Best of the Best.
Love that film.
It's very cool. So the word of mouth, you know, from our generation with Seagal is still very strong. It's just that young people who don't even have necessarily attention spans to watch whole films now will get their opinions from YouTube without actually watching any of the proper work, the proper studio.
Yeah, here's the thing. You want to talk about short attention span, not even... I have comments, for example, on that Steven Seagal front kick video I did with Pagasic, and the guy basically essentially, you know, called us idiots and, oh, you learned front kicks, you know, early on in karate. And then I replied to him, I'm like, you're missing the whole point of the video. And then he said, I didn't even watch it.
Oh my God.
So he's forming an entire opinion based on a title, and with the narrative, the negative Seagal narrative, that he can't contribute anything, you know, to a martial artist or a fighter in the UFC. He's just going with that narrative. I'm sure he probably heard the Boss Rutan voice clip. Oh, Seagal, they didn't teach him a front kick. That's stupid. You don't even have 10 minutes to watch the video before you comment. It's almost like a headline, you know, from a news article. where they make it sound really bad, but then when you read and get a little more context, you're like, that's actually not that bad.
Well, that's the power of that's what the power of a newspaper was, because when you're going to a convenience store to buy some milk or something, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to buy a newspaper, but you are going to read the headline because you're waiting in the queue, and there's the newspapers there, and it's the power of the headline has more power than any of the articles in it, because 10 times or 100 times the amount of people will see the headline and not read the article. And so that's the same principle we have with this subject, is that people are seeing the headline or seeing the summation of Seagal's work from one person's opinion, who doesn't know anything about Seagal, and it is then formed an opinion on that subject without seeing any of the key works, let alone all of them, like you should, you know.
Yeah, I will say this. I've had a few comments on different videos, Seagal related, where people had said, you know what, basically, and I think they've seen a few of my videos. They're like, I used to always go along with that negative Seagal narrative. You do kind of bring up some interesting stuff. I got to reevaluate. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm all about like that open mind. And let's look at things from like a different perspective, because there's so many videos out there. Again, if I talk about the front kick one, oh, Steven Seagal didn't do that. He didn't teach him anything. But that's why I propose a question like, what if? Like, and let's explore this possibility, and let's expand our minds into thinking a little bit different about this based on what Seagal said. And every word counts. He didn't say I taught them that front kick. He specifically mentioned like a way he throws it that is better able to land.
I didn't invent anything. I modified them in such a way that I think I can make my students and myself in a real fight land them.
But people like just don't even realize what he said.
I'm not saying I invented anything, and nobody should put those words in my mouth.
I get what he's saying, whereas other people are just, well, once they hear Steven Seagal, they just discount it entirely, I guess.
Yeah, that is what's happening. That is what's happening. And the thing is, the tides will turn, and you can say you were there saying this before it was cool again. You know what I mean? Or you were one of the people that did make it cool again.
I mean, so, when you mentioned the tides will turn, I'm more the guy, and not because I want conflict, but I'm more the guy who almost wants to go against the tide. Like, I hear all this negativity. Like, let me explore it and let me see if it's justified. And in someone like Steven Seagal's case, not whatsoever. And I'm proud to point that out. Very proud to point that out. Happy to point that out.
It's always time for the truth. And the fact is, his early body of work is excellent. It was so excellent that it created a whole bunch of knockoffs. Like, there was all kinds of stuff that came after, PM Entertainment, many things that were basically doing martial arts thrillers, right?
Sure.
And if these films weren't popular, if these films weren't loved, that wouldn't have happened. Now, obviously, that's in the late 80s and the mid to late 90s that was taking place. Well, we're a few decades later now, and so people have forgotten that, and all they're looking at is the direct-to-video work, and it's the wrong starting point. It's the wrong starting point. And they're also looking at someone who's been maligned by the mainstream media, who's been shamed and smeared.
He is an extreme psychopath.
For whatever reason, and maybe it's somewhere in between. I'm sure he's flawed. I'm sure he's hard to work with. But like I said, most of the great artists were, because the art and the devotion and the vision takes a lot out of you. And sometimes it's just what happens. We're all flawed people. I'm not saying Seagal is a perfect man. Like you, I was such a fan of Van Damme. And I still really like Van Damme. I think he has a very, very impressive body of work. But since I watched those Seagal films, it blew me away with not just the martial arts, but the persona, the screen presence. I just thought, wow, he's literally the coolest action hero there ever was.
You gonna arrest me? I'm out of bullets!
You
And
know?
I think that's kind of how he got into films. I mean, they usually will say he was talking to that really powerful agent. I think his name was Michael Ovitz, who took Aikido with Seagal. And they would hang out sometimes. And Seagal just had such this presence if he was just at a restaurant or anywhere. And he's like a tall, imposing figure. And he just sticks out in the crowd. And apparently that's why Ovitz thought, this guy could probably be big in the movies. And that screen presence, that's why he has a screen presence. Like, it did transfer over from apparently his real life, just presence in whatever room he's in, did transfer over to the screen quite well.